So I'm just going to jump straight into it. So the first one has to do with, if you didn't, this wasn't last week, but the week before, I talked about my very heightened concerns about OpenAI's announcement to get into, at least explore, the adult entertainment space and the use of their technology for that. And let me tell you, I was really surprised, not surprised by the response, but I've stepped on landmines over many times in my career, and you often don't realize you're about to step on a landmine till after it blows your leg off. And there was quite a response to my take on this. And again, usually I don't respond to responses to things because I don't necessarily always know it's helpful, and there's just lots of stuff out there. But there were just some things that came up that I thought, you know what, this is a big enough deal that I actually do want to respond to what came out of this and how people reacted to it. So my response is really broken down into three parts. So hear me out on this. The first part is, well, I'll just go through them. So there's three parts to it. The first one was the response that I received, because in it, I articulated that I'm coming from a biblical worldview, and I am a Christian, but that wasn't really, if you listen back to it, that was not the point of me bringing this up, but just more so saying I'm not blind to the fact that influences the way that I look at it. However, there are lots of other factors that are coming into play with this. And I was actually really surprised, both publicly in some of the comments, but also the private messages I got by people that were very scathing, actually, to be honest with you. Now, I'm surprised and not surprised by this. I actually had the opportunity to follow up with some people, and actually some of them meet live and just talk with them. And again, I was surprised, but not surprised. Honestly, I want to acknowledge the fact that I know that when people hear someone's a Christian or they're coming from a biblical worldview, that can sometimes incite a certain feeling in people. And a lot of times that feeling comes from a lot of hurt that has been inflicted on people by people carrying the banner of Christianity. And so I just want to say, when you hear me say that, you have a reaction to it, I'm sorry that that's been your experience, because it shouldn't be that way. And I know it happens. And I don't think it does anybody any good when we pretend that doesn't happen or we dismiss it. I know there has been a lot of legitimate hurt that has come at the hands of people who have said, well, I'm doing this because it's what the Bible says, or this is what God would want. And it's not an accurate statement. I think my response to that is, if you've met a Christian or anything, you've met that Christian. And so hopefully those of you who watch and listen to my content know that, hey, I'm just as unique and dynamic as anybody else. And honestly, some of the things people sent, it was very clear that they were taking their experience or their assumptions about what they thought or what they'd experienced, and they were making about me holistically as a person because of that. And there were a lot of things that people actually sent me that I go, I actually don't even agree with this. Like, you're arguing against me, and I actually am aligned to what you're arguing against, which was really interesting, which was why I actually followed up with some of these folks and said, can we talk? Can we actually have a conversation? Because I think there's things you're assuming about me. You're reacting to some of my stuff, and I'd rather just sit down with you and have a better understanding of things. And let me just say, that lesson, that reminder, and the reason I decided, one of the big reasons I wanted to respond to this was, one, to give additional clarity to my original points, but also as an encouragement to people that this is really, I experienced in the last 2 weeks, and have many times, but this one in particular was like, wow, I really stepped on this thing. This is a huge danger of assuming you know things about someone simply because of their religious background or their political affiliation or their ethnic background, any of these things. And honestly, if you've listened to my content, you know I really try and raise awareness about the risks of doing this. And it's why I talk so much about getting to know people on an individual level, and don't just assume you know something because you think something and you straw man that and all of that. And I would use this as an encouragement to folks, because some of the conversations, both, asynchronous via chat messages and things like that, and some of the live conversations I had, I genuinely enjoyed the conversation. And I can tell you right now, we didn't end the conversation where we all went, oh, great, and now we agree with everything. but we were able to understand each other better. And there was an opportunity to get to know each other. And so I would actually encourage people, if you have folks that you interact with or things that you're assuming about them, take the time to get to know them and actually understand them on a deeper level, because there are probably a lot of assumptions you're making about people that are likely not accurate. The other thing I will also say, because anybody who listens to my stuff knows that I will reference, occasionally here and there, how my worldview is playing into things. And let me just say again, some of the assumptions that were made was, oh, well, you're just saying this because of that. And I will be the first to say I'm often extremely skeptical of biblical defenses to things. When somebody just tells me, well, this is what you have to do because the Bible says, or whatever, I'm just as skeptical as probably some of the skeptics out there who are hesitant. And hopefully that comes through in some of the content that I create, because I have seen over the years, going back to my earlier point, I have seen the Bible, I've seen Christian values used as a weapon. And it breaks my heart when that happens. And I hate that that happens. And it's actually happened to me on many occasions, which is part of the reason I'm so skeptical about it and why I tend to dig into the text itself or try and understand what's really going on and actually look at natural law as well. And that was the case I was trying to make, which is why it was such a surprise when people had such a visceral reaction to that. And I think it speaks to some of the harm that has been done by people proclaiming to be Christians over the years and misusing scripture to justify horrific things. And so I just wanted to address that. If you ever want to know more or reach out, I am always happy to engage with people. And my goal is not to try and argue and convince you that you need to see the world the same way I do. I love learning from other people and understanding where they're coming from and why they're where they are. And so I've got a pretty crazy story myself. So it's not released yet, but I'm on a podcast called Standing Stones, where I do go into it a little bit deeper than I think I ever have on any of mine. So that's not released yet. But if you're actually curious, either one, just reach out and you can chat with me or watch for that. Shifting gears, though, off of that topic and focusing on really my response to some of the criticism around adult media. While I acknowledge that my biblical worldview obviously is what is ultimately rooted where I'm like, well, this is ultimately why I think we're seeing this play out this way and why we're seeing the destruction. Let me just tell you right now, I have lots of friends that do not adhere to my worldview, and there is countless amounts of secular data coming out that adult media is not a net positive for society. And there are people who you would not expect at all to be opposed to this, who are standing up going, this is a huge risk. So I'm not talking just about the AI piece. I'm talking about just adult media in general. So this is not, well, Christians don't like it and they're trying to ruin non-Christian fun. The data and the experiences are out there. This is serious. And so, I actually have not encountered, and feel free if you come across any, share it with me. I have not encountered any research or data that says this is a net positive. This is a benefit to people. So, based on some of the responses, some of the reactions that I got, some of the messages that I received saying, no, this is, again, a lot of the reactions I got had actually nothing to do with my point on the AI piece. They were all in defense of adult media. And let me just say, if you're in that camp of thinking it's neutral or a net positive, you don't have to believe me because of the worldview I hold to. Honestly, I would encourage people to go look this up and check it out. And quite frankly, like one of the things was, well, people are going to just do worse things if they don't have this. And that's not a compelling argument because the data doesn't support it. And the data is continuing to show that it's reinforcing and growing the very behaviors that lead to much more destructive things. So again, I'm always open to hearing other sides of this. I'm always open to looking at research that's coming from this, but anecdotal data or things that just say, well, I don't think it's that big of a deal, or I see this other trend, or I'm fine with it, I'm not affected by it. It's not in line with where the data is landing. And that's not just people who share my worldview. So if you're there, I really was surprised by how many people came to its defense. And I think it's largely because of what we see with how pervasive it is. And so, of course, something that people are very accustomed to, and it's very much integrated into their life, even if they don't necessarily like that it's there, the thought of it being taken away seems to stir a very uncomfortable reaction in folks. I was actually really also surprised by how many people defended it based on, well, we need a sexual outlet for things. And so this is a way to do that. And I just want to say my take on this is no, you don't. You can live a happy and fruitful life without sexual activity. And I think when we start placing something that maybe we enjoy or something that is good or that, whatever, when we start placing that on the same level as food, shelter, oxygen, this is actually one of the things that I believe can lead to us getting our priorities out of order. If you think a sexual outlet is a need, then suddenly the belief that, well, so adult media is required because there's a need that has to be met, and some people can't get this met through other channels, so they have to do it. And honestly, I think this is a large part of why we see such addiction and dependency on it, is because we are starting from this pervasive foundation that, well, we have to have this. We can't get it this way. So then this seems to be the only logical alternative to it. And then ultimately we begin fueling our reasons for keeping something that's so destructive and addictive because of where we started. And just as an example of this, if someone is addicted to drugs, we see an exponential rise in drug abuse. We don't fight against that by saying, well, people are so used to it, they're addicted to it. We just need to find harder and harder drugs to give these people. We can't pull them out. We actually try and get them less dependent on it. And that's the way we battle back with this. So I would highly encourage folks, many people who reached out to defend it, to say, I don't think this is that big of a deal. Do the research yourself and don't take my word. Honestly, I would encourage you to also look for research in a way that is not biased. Make sure that when you're looking for things, just look like, what are the effects of this on people? Don't say, is it harmful or is it beneficial? You're already biasing the results that you're going to get. And you can start to drill into this on a deeper level and say, I just want to see, what are the effects of this physiologically, psychologically, sociologically? Keep it neutral. You won't have to look very far to see that the data conclusively is showing we are dealing with something that is not in our best interest, despite the fact that for a moment it may seem like, well, that was kind of nice. And, the other thing that I saw a lot of in some of the responses was, well, I personally have not experienced harm, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. But when you see data that's saying 9 in 10 men are struggling with this or actively engaging, 6 in 10 women regularly engage in adult media, it's not surprising, that we would come to the defense of it. And that we would try and protect something regardless of what the data tells us about. And the thing is, because of how pervasive it is, we've got loads of data that validate, how harmful this can be. I think the other thing, though, is we really got to be careful. So if you listen to my last one or you listen to this one and you feel that side of you getting defensive and getting frustrated, so much so that you want to send me a scathing email or a DM, I would just say be really careful, because we are often terrible judges of what's good or bad for us. I'm keenly aware of the things that over the years and growing up, maturing, things that I would just go, well, I don't think it's that bad. I would be totally fine with this. And I think about having 7 kids. I mean, if I let them eat what they wanted because they thought it was fine, they'd eat nothing but junk food. And they'd go, well, see, Dad, I didn't die of a heart attack, or I'm not, struggling with this, yet I would know that the data is not in their favor for them to eat junk food. And I think this is where we got to be really careful when we justify things by saying, well, I personally don't think it's harmful. I've evaluated the impact on myself and I don't see it as being concerning, because a lot of times our impact assessment, one, it's very short term. We're looking at things where I don't know anybody who listens to this that you can message me if you want, if you actually have this, but I don't know a single person I've ever encountered in my life that they can't think of something where they look back and they go, you know what, if I knew what I know now, I would not have done that. And I wouldn't have gone down that path. And it just goes back to show us that we aren't always the best judges of what's good or bad for us. And our individual experiences don't paint a complete picture. I think about a lot of different things, that we just don't see in ourselves. And another piece that just came to mind as I saw some of these defenses, and as I had really serious conversations with people after the fact, was often seeing that you have an addiction is one of the hardest things to see in yourself. And I've grown up around addiction. I've had lots of people in my life who have wrestled with addiction. Nobody wants to think of themselves as being addicted to something. And so I get it. I understand why it's hard to say, this thing has got a hold on me that I really wish we didn't have. Because if you do that, that first step can be extremely overwhelming. So I'm sensitive to the fact, I understand where some of this defensiveness is coming from, but we also got to think it's not just about you and how it's affecting you and maybe your inner circle, but the output as a whole on society and what it does. Some of the defenses that came through were, well, it's just media of two consenting adults, and AI just makes it better because now that you don't even have to deal with the consenting adults. And this is just not the case in a lot of situations. There is a ton of stuff out there that is not consenting adults. That's just not what it is. And also, as we start digging into what do we mean when we say consent? Because is it really consent if you have no other options, or you get into something and you just feel like you can't get out, or you still like, at what point is your consent pulled back? So I think we just need to be really, really careful with this topic. And I understand where the defensiveness comes from. I did not expect the kind of response that I did or that I received. And so again, I won't not lean into things simply because people are uncomfortable with it, or, it feels a little messy. I think if anything, that's usually a good sign. I've found in my life, the things that I get really defensive about are probably the things I need to do a little self-examination on and go, why am I getting so hot-headed over this? My last piece on this, and then I'll transition to topic number 2, is the AI specifically. Because again, like I mentioned before, the vast majority of responses I got actually had nothing to do with AI in adult entertainment. Most of it was people jumping to the defense of adult media as it's totally fine, it's harmless, like you just this, or it was these overpowered, well, you're just this way, so you want a tyrannical reign and all this. It wasn't related to any of these things. So I actually want to revisit the adult entertainment, AI in adult entertainment piece, because my point with this was, one clarification that people reacted to when they heard this was, they reacted as they thought what I was saying was I was calling for a straight up full prohibition on adult media. And I think that's where some of the visceral reaction came from, was people were like, I have this thing. You're saying you want to take it away from me. Now, I don't know where that came from. I'm not sure why people interpreted that out of what I said. And I listened back to my response a couple times to see, hey, is there anything I said in here that I can kind of correct or go back on? I will be the first to say, yes, I firmly do believe, and I think the data supports it, that we as a society would be far better off with no adult media. And I don't, again, show me the data otherwise. So yes, do I think we would be better off without it? Now, there's a difference between I think we would be better off without it and my solution to this problem and concern about AI or adult media in general is, well, let's just put a whole on prohibition on that. And this was one of the people I ended up meeting with was asking me, well, so isn't your solution to just cancel all of this? And I said, look, like, I don't think that's a reasonable or even realistic solution. Even though I think that would be ideal, would I love it if we got to that place? I don't think the solution is we try and ban this stuff. So to anybody who listens to this and thinks, well, Christopher's solution to where things are going with AI and adult media in general is let's just ban it from everybody. Compliance doesn't work. I've been around the learning space. I've been around human behavior way too long to know you don't just mandate things and expect people to do it. So to the people who thought I'm taking a tyrannical approach or I want to take away your fun, like that's not how I operate. So let me be clear on that. I'm not going to get into my full blown perspective on what I think the right solution to this is, but I can tell you right now, the solution to it is creating awareness to how destructive this is and hopefully reducing the demand for it in people, where people see it for what it is and go, I don't want this presence in my life anymore. I think that's where I would like to get us to, not let's rip it out of people's death grip hands because and then we'll just force it through. It doesn't work. And then my goal is never to force my worldview on others, regardless of what it is. So I just wanted to clarify that point. My bottom line on this is really 2 points. First, based on all the data, there is not a lack of adult media in the world. So as we're talking about AI and adult media, there's not a lack of this stuff out there. It's not like anybody's going, I really wish I had more access to this, or I can't find the kind of media that I want. And so even if you believe it's harmless or you think it's a net positive, I firmly will stand on the state that there's not a case to exponentially expand its reach with AI. And that's exactly what AI is designed to do. It's designed to take something and accelerate or exacerbate it like through the roof. So my case against AI in adult media is to say, hey, this thing already is prevalent. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. People are already struggling with it. We got data proving this is not helping. Let's not strap a tank of nitrous oxide to it and send it into the stratosphere. We don't need to make this worse through additional personalization and accessibility. It's just not necessary. Second, based on how AI works, the other point that I want to make on the AI piece is it can be perceived that AI will make adult media less harmful than it is because, well, AI is doing it now. It's not people. And that's just not the way AI works. The way the industry works, the practices of the industry, we are not going to reduce the harm or reduce the people involved in this by simply saying, hey, let's use AI. It's a safer way to go about this. And if you want to go and listen back to why I make that case, that's really the whole point of me having that topic, was to focus on that and say, look, I'm not a fan of the stuff and I think we'd be better off without it. Let's certainly not take something that's overly pervasive, has an industry that's built on destructive practices, and make it bigger. That's just not where we need to be going.